Hello everyone, and welcome back to the fourth episode of TaleSpire Building Tips. Today we'll be looking at breaking patterns, shapes, and repetitions. I'm just gonna make a small break in the video right there, and say I'm sorry because I've kind of lost the audio of the video file, so I need to redub everything. So hopefully the quality will be there, and I will let you continue to enjoy the video. Currently, we just have a square terrain and two rectangles for a house. We will need to make it more interesting. We will first start with the main asset, the house, or the hero asset, and there is two ways to tackle this. You can either intrude or extrude. This is to say, push the wall outwards or push the walls inward the house. I'm now gonna quickly create a space for a door, my extrusion, and plan a future window. On top of the extrusion, I will put a roof, and this will probably make for a nice detail. On the sketch we did for the house, I had planned a chimney on this side of the wall. Obviously, with the stairs I'm not able anymore to put it there, but that's not an issue. I'm gonna work around the constraint and put the chimney someplace else. I think the back wall of the house will be a nice place for a chimney. I will place the blocks right now through the first and second floor to signify that a chimney is going there. Now let's move to the second floor. We have the balcony that is supposed to get here, but it's a bit plain. We could improve it by intruding one of the wall of the second floor and making a larger balcony. Right now, I feel that my new balcony space is a bit too big, so I'm just gonna shift everything else. Never keep something if you feel that you don't like it. And right now, it looks just as I like it. The back of the house is fine for me, so for now, I'm just gonna add a small extrusion right here under the patio or the storage area. And it will make for a nice space to use later. I'm now happy with the basic shape of my house, so I won't modify it anymore. This is obviously a tutorial house that I want to keep simple, but you just could keep adding and extruding as much as you want until the shape you came up with is to your liking. Though, keep in mind that often simple is best. We will now work on the cellar of the house, and I realize now that the new shape we've created would make for a really interesting shaft or stairs to go down. So I'm gonna delete the foam tile I have underneath the house and start building my cellar. The shape can be as you want, but keep it often under the house and not too big. Stairs always give me a little bit of trouble. Remember that you can shift mouse wheel to change the elevation of a tile you're currently placing. The base shape of the cellar is now finished, and I'm happy with the full house. We will now move on to more tedious work, but really important nonetheless. We will detail the terrain. With the terrain, it's really important to have less square visible. We'll work top-down by first adding big layers of grass and then filling in the gaps. Now that we have filled the terrain, we can start to work on the path from the house to the outside of the board. This is something really important to block out first, because the path is something that's quite important to your house as a detail, and you will need also to define the path first and then to fill it. I find it this way much easier to do it than just to do it by hand without really knowing where I'm going. Now that the path is defined, I will crudely fill it with the blocks I want to use and move on to finishing the hero asset. We have now defined the shapes and the bigger details of our board and our hero assets. Now we need to break the repetition of assets and the texture or the patterns that may appear within our textures. As you can see, the walls are all the same on my house, so you can clearly see that there is some repetition. There is obviously some holes in my first floor, and we will need to take care of that. I will finally integrate the window that I quickly placed into the building so that it makes more sense. And I will start to work on the walls. There is twice the same wall, so I'm gonna delete one and use the corner piece. Though the issue I see is that the corner piece has a really distinct texture or pattern that is easily recognizable. I could either use two walls clipped together to make a corner, or a simpler solution that don't involve clipping there is just rotating the corner to show the inside face of it. And it makes for a nice detail, which is always great. I will continue to remove the repetition of each face of the first floor. We will finally place the chimney block in lieu of the hole in the wall. And continue to make the outer walls more interesting. Now that the first floor is made, we can work on the second floor. The goal here is to create more texture variation, define the main rooms, and it will allow us to place the windows and other various elements to create variation. I have placed two windows next to each other because I will separate them with a wall. This is something I would not usually do because the wall will extrude a little bit outwards and it will be visible on the other face of the house. For the front face of the house, I will do something nicer. It will also help break the pattern of the house and avoid having all the same walls looking the same close to each other. Let's continue on that note and modify this wall that looks too much like the other ones. The thing you can do for that is remove that tile set, use a square floor, and grab a standalone wall and rotate it. And like that, you have a much more interesting facade and an asset that looks way better for me. We will now work on the second most important asset after the house, this is to say the main path. We've blocked out roughly the path, but now we will need to, one, add details, break the pattern and the linearity of it. To that extent, I will first quickly poke holes into the path, so I'll be able to change it with new tiles. I've also realized that some of my tiles produce a pattern that I can easily see. This is obviously an issue that will rise up constantly with TaleSpire, because all the tiles are the same, and they're not seamless. This means you'll need to find a way to break the repetition and patterns appearing that way. To that extent, you can simply rotate one of them, and it will ostensibly break the pattern. This is important to note that you don't need to rotate each one differently to break the pattern and avoid repetition. The brain is really good at noticing patterns, but as soon as you scramble things up a little bit, it will not be as visible anymore. Some tiles will produce a really strong pattern, something that is really noticeable due to the fact that they have either a strong color or shape or any distinct sign that will stand them apart. You need to know how to use those. If you use them in a big flat area, you will really quickly see that there is a pattern, and even if you rotate some of them, you will still be able to see that it's the same asset rotated. In that case, choose less prominent tiles that are more bland, but even where you use them on a more bigger surface area, the repetition of the tiles won't be as much noticeable. Then you can break that repetition by adding some rotation, and then you can break it furthermore by adding new tiles that are just a bit different. By breaking down big areas in that way, you'll be able to create much more interesting surfaces. So let's apply all those tips to the path while also including some height variation in some places to get a smoother path. Now that the path is finished, we'll work on making the terrain less blocky and with more detail and height variation. You have to keep in mind that in nature there is almost never square angles or square shapes. We will try to break the lines and make them more smooth. To this extent, I'm working top down to make sure that my top layer always covers perfectly the layer downwards and that my transitions are easier to make. I've tried to work upward, but by my experience, this has proven more difficult to work with. Just a little bit of time and now our terrains looks much more interesting. There is details, elevation, variation of patterns, and we've broke linearity. We'll now take a short pause from the main assets to discuss another pattern that you need to watch out when building. Let's say that you've gathered a few assets from the Tales Bazaar or the Tales Tavern that you want to copy-paste into nice streets. The issue that arises when you paste them as is that you have a huge line that is really visible. The assets individually are really nice and detailed, but when close to each other, the first floor line is really showing. You can break this linearity or this huge line and in many cases add more detail to your city, house or streets by doing a simple thing. You can simply, as with the house, intrude or extrude or simply offset your copy-paste to create a much more interesting street. It will look more organic, lively and natural. That way, you avoid the main issue with the linearity and the fact that the asset may tend to look the same because we're using currently a limited tile set. Finally, today we will add the first pass of big details, the trees and maybe some rocks if I feel like it. I will first place the trunks and then construct the trees. The trunks will allow me to quickly visualize where I want to place the main trees. Trees are often found clumped together, and they're usually not on a grid-like pattern. If you want to make a plantation, this would make sense, but in our case, we would like to make a natural-looking forest. Smaller trees tend to be on the exterior side of the forest, and bigger trees will be found on the interior of the forest. Obviously, you will put different size of trees everywhere, but you can keep that in mind to accentuate where you want your forest to start and where you want your forest to end. This is now the end of the 4th episode of Building Tips with TaleSpire. I hope you learned something today and that you will excuse the technical mess I've made with that episode. Hopefully it will come out great. Anyway, I will see you on the next episode and have a good day.